As a content creator who's made a lot of videos about beginner cameras and beginner tips for cameras and photography and content creation, I get a lot of questions about what should be the first camera for people just getting into content creation or photography. While there are a lot of great interchangeable lens camera options, but while interchangeable lens cameras are all well and good, there's a category that gets forgotten about for the most part. And that's point and shoots. And I will admit, I was in that category of photographers that completely ignore point and shoots for the longest time until I actually got a chance to get one myself and decided to go for it. And I'll tell you, if interchangeable lens cameras and camera bodies are a swamp to sink into, point and shoots are in a league of their own. So let's have a look and let's talk about them. So my re-entry into the world of point and shoots came in the form of getting a used Lumix DMC LX15. This thing. And I actually used this for that whole intro clip, as you might be able to tell, but I still felt comfortable doing that because this little thing can do 4K up to 30 FPS, and it can do 1080p up to 60 FPS. So, I didn't have to sacrifice that much. Or did I? Let me know in the comments. What did you think? And what surprised me and why I got this particular little point and shoot is the fact that this lens can actually open up to f1.4, though it's only when it is in its 24 millimeter area. Definitely a surprising feature to find in something that small and compact. But this video isn't specifically about this point and shoot, but it's about point and shoots in general and how they've been completely ignored for the most part in the photography and videography sphere. So I thought we'd take a look at 3 great upsides with point and shoots, and then 3 significant downsides with point and shoots. And maybe by the end, you will be able to tell if maybe you should consider going for a point and shoot instead of an interchangeable lens camera. And let's start off with upside number 1, compactness. There are plenty of small interchangeable lens cameras that you can get, and combined with a pancake lens, you can get a really compact setup. But none of those hold a candle to how small you can get with a point and shoot. This here is a Sony a5100. It is an interchangeable lens camera, a Sony APS-C crop sensor, and generally a pretty great compact option. Though it doesn't have a viewfinder, but I digress. Now, comparing that to the Lumix DMC LX15, when you bring them side by side, you notice the A5100 is indeed bigger. But that is before you put a lens on it. With the Lumix itself, that includes the lens. With the Sony, even with the kit lens, which is tiny in its size, now you're already much thicker than you are with the Lumix. So if you need a small package to take with you for like traveling, for example, then you'll be hard pressed to find anything as compact as a point and shoot. Upside number 2, integrated lens. Now with a interchangeable lens body, after you finally choose on a body, then you need to choose on a lens. Not only is it that headache of going out and doing more research, there's also another big factor, which is money. With a point and shoot, that's not an issue, because when you buy a point and shoot, you get everything. You have your lens ready to go. And not only that, when you have a point and shoot with a quality lens like this one, Because this, for example, the lens on the Lumix is a 24 to 72, which is a good range, and it is indeed optical. It's not digital. So digital zoom is a no-no for me. But on this Lumix, it is optical from 24 to 72 full frame equivalent. The kit lens on the Sony a5100, for example, well, that's a 60 to 50, but in full frame equivalence, it is a 24 to 75, so a very similar range, but the aperture on this is a 3.5 to 5.6. Comparing that to the point and shoot's 1.4 to 2.8, it's significantly better in terms of aperture on this little point and shoot. If you want a similar kind of performance from a lens on an interchangeable camera, well, you need something like the Sigma 18 to 50 f2.8, for example. And that is about twice as big as this kit lens. Meaning that, sure, you'll get a better lens, but you'll also increase the size of the package, almost doubling it. And not only that, that lens itself costs about the same as the whole point and shoot. And that leads us to upside number 3, cost. So having a great lens already built into the camera takes away worry and headache and a big chunk of the costs of the total investment for the camera. And on top of that, when you look at the prices of point and shoots, they're most of the time cheaper than any sort of a decent interchangeable lens camera body itself. So you're already saving on the body and you don't need to get an additional lens. The LX15, for example, this camera went for about $500 when it was still sold in Finland. It's discontinued now, but I digress. And for that price, you got a camera that has a great lens, a great range in terms of focal length, can shoot 4K up to 30 frames per second, 1080p up to 60 frames per second. It has a built-in focus bracketing mode, of course, a simple flash, but something that also has 5-axis image stabilization, all in a package that can fit into the pocket of your jeans. Now that is some great value for money. But as there are upsides, there must also be downsides. Leading us to downside number 1, sensor size. The reason point and shoots can be so compact is that the sensor inside behind the lens is so small that it doesn't take up a lot of room. Now, while great for the size, it comes with some significant downsides. The LX15, like many other higher end point and shoots, has a 1-inch sensor, or to be more realistic, a sensor that has a diagonal length of 15.86 millimeters. Now compare that to something like a full frame camera that has a sensor of 43.8 millimeters. And the size difference between those two is massive. That means that even though the lens on the camera says that it's an f1.4, when you have that size, that small of a sensor, that is a completely different thing than if it was an f1.4 on a full frame camera lens. Meaning that it is nowhere near the same shallow depth of field as it would be on that full frame camera, or an APS-C camera for that matter. Not only that, because the sensor is so small, it struggles for light in any sort of a dimly lit environment. Also, if you try to up the ISO, it is so much more sensitive in that ISO range. You will get grained so much faster than with a full frame camera, an APS-C camera, or even a Micro Four Thirds camera, just because of that small sensor. Which leads us to Downside number 2, the integrated lens. As you can see, this is a double-edged sword. Once you pick up the point and shoot, that's it. You also cannot change your mind. You have what you have, and if you need to go wider, tough. If you need to zoom in more, tough. You can't do it. So that means whatever's on your camera is what you got. And while often imposing limitations on yourself as a photographer can be a good thing and it can teach you a lot about photography, there are also situations where those limitations can just make some things impossible. Like, for example, if you want to use this camera to shoot birds that are far away, well, you just can't. There's no way to zoom this in that much. Like if you had a 300mm telephoto lens on an interchangeable lens camera. This can do nothing like that. It's just physically impossible. So while it can be a blessing to have everything set out for you in one complete package, it can also be a hindrance. And that leads us to our downside number 3, wrong competition. For the most part, all of the upsides and the downsides that are present in a point and shoot already exist in a device that you own. And it's in your pocket right now, or on your table, or you're holding it. You guessed it, it's your smartphone. The camera on your smartphone is also very compact. You don't need to worry about buying any sort of lenses for it, and it doesn't cost you anything extra, unless you're getting a better phone just because it has a better camera. But basically any smartphone in the market today has a camera. But not only that, it also shares all the same downsides as well. You can't really get any sort of accessories for it. You can't change the lens on your camera. Sure, you might have a triple lens setup, but for the most part, if you want to use the one that's actually of higher quality, then you're stuck with one. Now, I will argue that the LX15 does take better photos than 90% of the cameras out there, of the phone cameras out there, but the point still stands. Why get another small sensor camera with all the same shortcomings than the one that you already have with you in your pocket? For me, I will happily say that I will shoot with my LX15 over my Pixel 6, and that mostly comes down to just having a separate device for my photos. Of course, on top of that, there's the fact that I can shoot better quality RAWs and I can adjust them much better than any phone camera. But for the most part, it comes down to just being able to focus on your photography or your videography. You have a device that you use and you can just, well, let's just say that when I'm trying to get that perfect landscape shot, I can focus on that with having a proper camera for it. And on top of that, let's just face it, we spend way too much time on our phones already anyway. So if I'm in nature or something and I want to focus on something there, picking up a camera is much preferable, at least to me, than picking up my phone even there. But in the end, it all comes down to preference. So that is why I would love to know what you guys think. So I know I went a bit and rambled on, but I would love to know your thoughts on point and shoots. Are they still relevant? Or would you consider buying one if you were just starting out? Let me know that in the comments below, and do me a favor and have a great rest of your week. And I will catch you all next time. Okay? Bye.